These are the two nutrition tracking apps that I recommend my clients use, and spoiler alert, Nutracheck is the better one, but MyFitnessPal will always have a free version available, so I'm going to go through how to use that as well. While Nutracheck, after a 1 week free trial, you will pay between 30 and 40 euro a year for it, which is still cheap. Anyways, I'm going to be taking you through both apps in this video. The lighter white background indicates I'm going through Nutracheck app, and if you see a black background, that means I'm going through MyFitnessPal. The first thing you're going to do to get set up on each app is to put in your calorie and macro goals yourself. If your coach hasn't given you one, you can Google the Harris-Benedict equation, and that will give you a pretty accurate estimation of what you need. It won't always be 100%, none of them are, but it's a good starting point to test out for the first 2 weeks. After you've got your calories in, you can then adjust the macro goals, so those are your carbs, proteins and fats. Then when it comes to actually tracking, always use the barcode scanner whenever you have the option. It makes it so much easier to make sure you got the right product and the right calorie information and macros and so on. Whenever possible, weigh your food dry before cooking because the water weight will change, and weigh ingredients separately. Don't log porridge when you've put in all those extra toppings. Put in oats, flax seeds, milk, fruit separately and log each of them, because every single recipe is different and you've got to log what you've eaten. If you're using the scales and you're taking things out of a packet, what you can do is you can put the packet of food on the scales, press tear to bring it to zero, pour what you need out of the packet, put the food back on the scale, and whatever negative value is on the scale is what you've taken out. If you can't see the scale because the dish you have is too big, then place another bowl or lunchbox underneath that plate, that wide dish, and then you'll be able to see the screen and how many grams you're weighing. You're then going to search up the raw, uncooked version of that food on Nutracheck and log it there. But if you're using MyFitnessPal, it can be very, very, very inaccurate because it will give you hundreds of options depending on what other people using MyFitnessPal have created on that app, because everybody shares that database. So what your best bet if you want accuracy in this case is to Google the food first in its raw state, how many calories per gram there is there, and then find a matching version of that on MyFitnessPal. You will only ever have to do this once if you repeatedly eat the same types of foods, because that food will come up in your history, so whenever you search up that food again, it is the first one to pop up and you won't have to go through the hassle of Googling it again. If you are eating out and you are unsure how many calories are in your food, obviously because you cannot weigh everything, then your best guess is to take the average of whatever comes up on MyFitnessPal. That is exactly what I'm doing here with this cappuccino. I put in roughly the volume that I have. I sometimes overestimate just to give myself a little bit of wiggle room or room for error. And same with the brownies, I multiply by 1.2, because even when you have packets of food and you scan the barcode and you log those, most of those pre-packaged foods are inaccurate by up to 20%, so it could have 20% more calories than is on the packet or 20% less. For example, if you had brownies that were 100 calories, it could be 120 or it could be 80, and those kind of things add up over time if you have a lot of pre-packaged foods, which is why it's very useful to mostly rely on whole unpackaged foods, because you know what you're having. The Nutracheck app is a little different. In fact, it's a little more accurate, because if I know for a fact that I went to Costa for a cappuccino, I can search it up on their database and pick the exact order that I had and log it there. And sure, there still might be a little room for error. Not everything is weighed in Costco either, but it is a lot more accurate than the guesstimations on MyFitnessPal. You can go onto almost any type of popular brand of takeaways or cafes or restaurants on Nutracheck. They will mostly be there, and it will help you so much for times when you're eating out but you still want to stay on track with your tracking goals. Excuse the pun. Even here there are some generic options for a Chinese takeaway, which is really helpful when you're really unsure on what to order and how you can fit it in. It just gives you an idea of how many calories you could save ahead of time if you wanted to fit in certain meals out into your life while still staying on track with fat loss goals or things like that. If you are trying to log a recipe that you make in bulk, things can get a little more tricky because, like I said before, every recipe is different, and just because the recipe is on the app doesn't mean they're using the exact same ingredients in the same quantities as you are, so the nutrient information isn't always the same. In this case, you can go into the recipe section in the Nutracheck app and log all the ingredients there that you weighed in bulk, and then you put in how many servings that recipe makes, and the app will divide up the calorie and nutrient information for you into however many servings you put in, and you can log it that way. This is super handy if you're preparing food for a family or meal prepping for yourself or anything like that. As you can see here in the recipe maker, I just put in the ingredients for what I put in the entire pot of mashed spuds, and then I divide it into 4 servings, so it divides the total amount of calories for the whole recipe into 4, and that's what I can log in my day of eating. MyFitnessPal has the exact same feature on the free version as well. As you can see here, I have cinnamon rolls, hummus, bread, loads of recipes saved here, and you can do it for food as well. If you scan a barcode and it doesn't come up in the database, you can put it in yourself, put in the name, description of what it is if you want, however servings are in the container, and the nutrition information on the back of the packet. Just getting set up is the clunkiest part, and after that it's smooth sailing with logging the foods that you regularly have. Honestly, if you're guessing, you're messing. It is so much easier to get the right information and stay on track of your goals instead of half-assing this. It is a bit tedious at the start, but it makes logging food so much easier, so it won't always be this way. But even the most experienced people in nutrition science make mistakes, including dietitians, so you're better off weighing by the gram and being accurate and getting your results quicker. There are exceptions to this rule, and that is when foods are prepackaged in certain portions already, like wraps, rolls and bars. You can scan the barcode as is and log them the way they are. Also, there's fruit and vegetables. If you want to have a ton of those, which you should, it is hassle to weigh everything by the gram there, and because there's such a low margin for error, I recommend that you do guesstimate those, because it'll make you more likely to include them in your diet when there isn't so much of a barrier to having them. Like I said, there's such a low margin for error there that if you are struggling with your calories, I highly doubt fruit and veg are the problem. Still log them, especially to keep track of your fibre, because that is so important, but you don't have to weigh those by the gram. You can eyeball those. Besides that, everything else does get weighed by the gram. All your meat, your fish, your carbs, your pasta, your rice, your potatoes, your oils, your sauces, they get weighed by the gram because they have a substantial amount of calories, and you want to make sure you're as accurate as possible so you can reach your goals as quick as possible. When it comes to earning more calories, do not by any means log exercise in these calorie tracking apps. They are so inaccurate. Every person is so different. The duration of your workout, the intensity, your body, everyone is so different. So don't do that, especially because when you're given your calorie and macro recommendations, your activity levels were already taken into account anyways. If you do want to earn more calories, the best thing you can do is increase your calorie expenditure with high fiber and high protein foods versus ultra processed foods, because you will feel more energized to move more and it will keep your appetite more regulated. That doesn't mean you can't have ultra processed foods. They just lack nutrients. Of course, include them in your diet, but it just means the majority of what you eat should center around fiber and protein. And then after that, once you hit those goals, you can include the foods that you enjoy. Some mistakes to avoid when tracking calories is inconsistency. If you are not tracking every day, you will not be on track every day, and that can throw off your progress. Now, every person is different and we may be off track to different degrees and it might not derail your progress, but let's say hypothetically that you were in a calorie deficit during the weekdays, you're very quote unquote good, and you banked 800 calories in a deficit. That means you had 800 less calories than you needed during the weekday. So you have 800 calories saved for the weekend. But then you have 1,000 extra calories over the weekend through drinks and takeaway or any other foods, and you end up not being in a calorie deficit throughout the week anymore. If you want to enjoy yourself a little more on the weekend, you have to be strategic about it. I do not recommend over-restricting during the week because that can lead to muscle loss and feeling ravenous and overall feeling like crap, and also lead you to binge at the weekends. Include the foods you enjoy every day if you can, and of course you can bank calories for the weekend, but try not to go more than 500 calories below what you need to maintain your body weight so that you don't run yourself into the ground. You can actually use the Nutracheck app to check how many calories extra you've banked for the weekend if this is something you're interested in doing. The second mistake to avoid is using volume instead of weight. This means rather than using cups and spoons and tablespoons, you should be using grams or ounces, because that is much more accurate. You could be 1,000 calories off without knowing it if you go by volume. I've made that mistake in the past and I won't make it again. The third mistake to avoid is eyeballing your food. If you're tracking, you're tracking. Educate yourself on food. There is a time and a place for eyeballing, to be fair, but in this case, if you want good results and you want to be accurate and you want to get those results fast as possible, then consistency is key. Consistency with doing the right thing. So try not to eyeball your food. Just weigh what you can, and eventually it will be quicker and quicker and quicker over time as you will be logging the same foods that you usually eat. The fourth mistake to avoid is tracking at the end of the day and forgetting a lot of foods that you've eaten. There might be some sips and bites and snacks that you haven't remembered, and you don't track them and you think that you're on track, but you're not really. So just track as you go through the day, and that will help you so much more, and including everything you eat in the day, and then it gives you a good insight into what you like to include in your diet and what you realize you didn't actually need and you won't miss. And that leads me to my fifth point, which is skipping snacks and drinks. That doesn't mean you can't have them, I have them all the time, my clients have them all the time. It just means you need to take them into account and they can't be skipped. The next mistake is eating back calories you've supposedly burned. No matter what your fitness watch says or what the app says, they have not a clue what you've burned. Not even the treadmill. So don't bother trying to eat back calories burned. Your activity levels are already taken into account by your calculated calorie and macro needs, so just go by that. Another mistake to avoid is wasting time measuring out every time you have a glass of orange juice or milk or anything like that. You only have to measure once. Fill the glass or mug that you usually have with water, pour it into a measuring jug, and then you know the volume in millilitres of that glass or mug, and you never have to weigh it out or measure again. And the last mistake to avoid is going by the app's recommendations for how many calories you should be having. MyFitnessPal will tell me to have 1400 calories when I need a hell of a lot more, and it has made that mistake with a lot of people, and it can lead to a very negative relationship with food when people feel very guilty of going over what MyFitnessPal recommends because they need more, but MyFitnessPal just over restricts for people. Unless you're short, have a sedentary lifestyle and are in a calorie deficit, you're going to need more than 1400 calories, and even then you can definitely boost your metabolism by weight training because the process of recovery from that burns a lot more calories at rest than other forms of exercise. Walking 1,000 more steps than you do right now, managing your sleep quality by putting screens away an hour before bed and having your meals earlier in the evening, eating a high fibre and a high protein diet to burn more calories through digestion. Now, sometimes MyFitnessPal can get it right and Nutracheck is a little bit better. It's not as extreme with restriction, but I find that the best equation we have so far is the Harris-Benedict equation for estimating how many calories you would need on a daily basis. It's not 100% accurate. Unless you were hooked up to a machine, it never will be, but it is a good way to start off. Just Google that Harris-Benedict equation, put in the data it asks for, your height, age, weight, etc. It will calculate your BMR, your basal metabolic rate, which is the amount of calories that you need to basically help your body function. Even if you didn't bat an eyelid or lift a finger, your BMR is how much energy your body needs at rest, keeping your lungs, heart, liver ticking over. Then you put in your activity levels to get your total energy expenditure, your TEE, and that will estimate how many calories you need on a daily basis when taking into account how active you are. If your goal is fat loss, you're going to subtract 200 to 500 calories from that total energy expenditure number and test it out for a few weeks. And if you see a difference in how clothes fit and how you look in the mirror and things like that, then you know you're in a calorie deficit and you're on track. If your goal is just to perform well and you're just checking that you're fueling your body right, then keep in mind that the amount of energy you burn from a day-to-day basis varies a lot and you don't have to be bang on with that number, but staying in around it would be ideal. And if your goal is to build muscle mass and you've been lifting for more than 2 years, you may need to be in a slight surplus, so you can increase your calories by 5% even and see how you go with measurements over a longer period of time. Thank you for watching. I hope this video was helpful.